Okay. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. I am Dr. Ju Choi Rokas with the U.S. Army, co-chair of the Anthropometry Technical Committee of the International Ergonomics Association, IEA. I am also joined today by my co-chair, Dr. Sandra Limoni with the Institute of Biomechanics of Valencia in Spain, who has been instrumental in shaping this initiative. It's truly our pleasure to welcome all of you to the first webinar in our new series. Over the next 3 years, the Anthropometry TC will be hosting a series of webinars focused on advancing the global dialogue around anthropometric data, methods, and applications across a variety of domains. Our goal is to create a platform for knowledge sharing and collaboration among researchers, practitioners, and policymakers, while highlighting both foundational and emerging areas in the field. Um, to kick off the series, we begin with a session that takes us back to the origins, exploring the history of anthropometry in general, and specifically the role of military anthropometry within the U.S. Department of Defense. The military has played a critical role in shaping anthropometric research and its practical applications, influencing everything from equipment design to ergonomics and health standards. This historical perspective not only help us understand how far we've come, but also provides valuable context as we look to future innovations. Now it's our pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Todd Garley. Dr. Garley is an anthropologist with the U.S. Army and has nearly 30 years of experience leading a wide range of research projects. His work spans traditional anthropometry, equipped soldier anthropometric studies, and cutting edge digital anthropometric research. And I believe that Dr. Garley will share some more details about his background during the webinar. Before we start, let me give you a couple of announcements. If there is any technical issue, please use the chat option. If there is any actual question about the contents of today's webinar, then please feel free to type in your question using the Q&A option. And then if you do want the certificate of attending today, then you will get the email right after this webinar, including 4 questions about today's webinar contents. If you correctly answer all 4 of them, then you will get the certificate. And I think that's it for my announcement. All right, then, Dr. Garley, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Choi. Thank you, Sandra, for inviting me to this webinar, the first of the series. It should be interesting. I have not done a webinar, so trying out all these new technologies. So I'm going to look at a brief history of anthropometry, as Dr. Choi said. Again, I've been here with the DevCom Soldier Center at NATIC for 23 years. Somebody once said, I'm the longest tenured bioanthropologist in the United States DoD. I think they meant I was old. So I've been here a long time doing a lot of manual anthropometry, helping out with 3D anthropometry over the years, equipped anthropometry. My background comes from archaeology, osteology, forensic anthropology, repatriation work for repatriating remains back to indigenous populations, and anthropometry. My schooling took place primarily in Canada at the Memorial University of Newfoundland, where I did my undergraduate in osteology and archaeology. At McMaster University, where I did master's looking at forensic facial reproduction, and then a PhD looking at growth of children in Burlington, Ontario, Canada. The University of Manitoba saw me move out and work with Indigenous remains, repatriating them to local communities out of the museums. And just note, all the AI generated illustrations you'll see throughout here were created by myself using Copilot AI. So what I hope to do is give a brief introduction of anthropometry here, provide a brief overview of the history of anthropometry, and then focus a little bit more on the military anthropometry, primarily the DoD in the U.S., and then give a little bit of an overview of the work that we do here at the Applied Ergonomics Branch at DevCom Soldier Center. So anthropometry, or the measurement of humans, derived from anthropos, human, and metron, measure, falls under one of the four fields in anthropology research. Those including archaeology, linguistic anthropology, cultural anthropology, and biological anthropology. So most of you probably know archaeology looks at the ancient civilizations primarily through, not necessarily ancient, but through material remains of the population. In more recent times, a lot of people look at garbage archaeology, looking at modern material remains of populations. Other individuals like Dr. Jim Tuck looked at Red Bay, Newfoundland for whalers, and in Ferryland, Newfoundland, where I did a few summers of archaeology. Linguistic anthropology looks at language development, communication, its role in looking at societies and cultural identities. Cultural anthropology looks at sort of traditions, beliefs, and customs of past and present populations, thinking about the Kung in Africa and the Maori. And then biological anthropology, which is mostly my focus, looks at, and this is where anthropometry falls under, looking at the biological diversity across populations. We're trying to explore humans, non-human primate evolutionary patterns, and includes research in genetics, primatology, skeletal biology, and at least not anthropometry. Sorry. So the anthropometry, it's a systematic study of the physical, compositional makeup of the human to better understand population variation with respect to age, biological sex, and race. Where's my buttons here? So anthropometry is very important, influences many disciplines, shapes a lot of scientific research in healthcare, engineering, and social policies. So within health and anthropometry, look at things like body mass index, body composition, looking at body proportions to help the children meet their growth patterns as needed. If not, we need to look at see how to adjust those, see if we can influence that as well. Ergonomic design and anthropometry influences design and development, and that's a lot mostly what we look at here. Workspaces, vehicle platforms, and clothing and equipment. Performance in anthropometry, a lot of stuff looking at body composition, looking at injury prevention, athletic selection, if individuals are suited for specific sports, and things like that. We're moving a lot more into performance, trying to apply our anthropometric research among the center here at DevCom to look at performance of the soldier and how we can improve that performance and increase their performance. Looking at genetic diversity in anthropometry, looking at different migration patterns and evolution changes over time, and how the environment influences physical characteristics, explores cultural variations in body shape and size. And then forensic anthropology as well, or forensic anthropometry, where we look at identifying individual remains of unknown individuals, usually in criminal investigations or disaster victims, but also we have a section of the military that looks at trying to identify missing soldiers and warfighters from past wars to help bring them back to their families. A lot of that is done out of Hawaii, and I just actually heard of one was just happening just recently, excavating, looking for some flights that went missing during the Vietnam War. So I just want to go over a high-level view of anthropometry, sort of the history. It dates back to the early Egyptian, Greek, and Roman civilizations, and there's a lot of interest back then in the variation of the human body. Um, at that point, it's primarily for artistic and architectural purposes. But the Egyptians developed standardized measurements, mathematical ratios based on the parts of the human. So, for example, the cubit you see down in the bottom left corner, some images from Answer 2, our Army Anthropometric Survey, that kind of reflects the measure of the cubit from the forearm to the tip of the finger, and then palm distances, and even smaller to digit measurements for smaller measurements. And they created some sort of laws of proportions. This was carried through to Greek times, where they developed additional mathematical ratios and tried to create the ideal body proportions. Oh, excuse me. During the Roman civilizations, they didn't so much as invent more ways to look at proportions of the human, but they adopted some of the Egyptian and Greek methodologies and helped design military equipment, applied it to health, surgical aids, and treatments, as well as looking at cultural identity, where they sort of an important period was looking at representing beauty, power, and the desirable features of the human body. And so we can see some of the Egyptian canon for proportions of developing statues and architecture, and then the Greeks as well. So during the Renaissance period, there was a lot of work from the artistic community exploring and applying human body proportions and trying to explain human anatomy and get a better example of that. Probably everybody's familiar with Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, looking at the geometry of the ideal human figure. And this was taken from the architect during the Roman period, Vitruvius, who was an architect and explained body proportions to help build architecture. Also, Albrecht Dürer, he did explored comparative and differential anatomy, so introduced things of different human physiques, looking at fat individuals, tall, thin, short, looking at differences between baby, children's, and adult proportions over time, and just some of the artistic representations of the anatomists. So as we move into the 17th and 18th centuries, we start to see a lot more period of comparison classifications of the humans, with work like Dabiton, Camper, Ritzius, Morton, Linnaeus, some of the individuals that stand out, looking at work on comparative anatomy, and this lays the groundwork for our future work that we do now. People like Camper developed a method for measuring the facial angle comparison, looking at prognathism, sort of the protrusion of the face. Ritzius looked at development of the cephalic index, so we have different shapes of the head, and that has implications for growth and development in modern days. And also Morton, who developed a very detailed measurement system for measuring skull measurements of the individual mini skulls. And then Linnaeus, who is critical for classifying systems and classified biological differences between animals, including humans. Now, a lot of this work was very important for what we do nowadays, but again, a lot of it was applied and misused during this time period, trying to look at intellectual differences between races and populations. So we look at what we look at as we're moving away from that, hopefully soon to the 20th century. But these methods still exist today, taking very detailed measurements, but we try to apply that into other areas and not to apply it to looking at intellectual differences between populations. So as we move into the early 20th century, 19th and 20th centuries, we get individuals like Bertillon, Galton, and Quetelet. Um, so Bertillon developed a very detailed system for full body measurements. It's kind of known as the father of physical anthropometry. Um, but a lot of this was applied to the criminal system. So he indicated his thoughts were that if you could measure a person, you could identify them and uh, sort of identify them through measurements, and so if they did recidivism, uh, we could identify them through measurements. So he had some applications that we don't follow, but at least the detailed measurements of the individual looking at differences uh, was an important part of applying this to modern day anthropometry. Um, Francis Galton, he developed a lot of statistical concepts and methods of correlation um, and regression, looking at the human compared to each other in a statistical sense. And in 1885, uh, opened up an anthropometric laboratory for the measurement of the human form, and actually had at the I forget the year now. The London World Fair had a station set up to actually measure individuals there and collect data on them. And then Quetelet, who starts looking into our what we call sort of our key person that we go back to, uh, measured about 5,000 Scottish soldiers' chest circumference and was trying to basically look at the distribution and identify the average man, of which most of us know there's no true average person. Um, if there was, it'd look kind of weird. But he introduced concepts like body mass index um, and the concept of the normal distribution. So we could look at the sort of plotting the individual against other people and comparing those measurements. So also during that time, we've got Rudolf Martin, all important for the development of the anthropometer, which most of us probably use as a GPM tool. Um, and again, developed a precise set of body measurements and standardized techniques that we carry a lot of those through to modern day, trying to measure, because the key to anthropometry is trying to standardize measurements and be able to measure between researchers the same thing. He also developed a handbook of anthropometry. Franz Boas was important in terms of the anthropology overall, is that he applied the anthropometric methods to look at human variation. And many of these challenge racial stereotypes. Race was not a biological static trait. It was influenced by health and nutrition. And he showed this by measuring immigrants children that came to the U.S. compared to individuals of the same population group that were born here in the U.S. and sort of recognized that improved health and nutrition in the United States was a significant factor in growth and development of the human. So more currently, we use a lot of these standardized methods to measure people. These are images from the anthropometric survey conducted through DEFCON Soldier Center. We still use similar tools for manual anthropometry, but have moved into a digital realm for collecting anthropometric data using 3D scans and 4D scans, looking at movement and capturing anthropometry in motion. And I believe we'll have a talk on that coming up shortly during these webinars, looking at 3D imaging and scanning. So again, the goal is to be able to collect these scans and extract measurements that are, comparable and standardized. They may be different. Some of these measurements that are taken, like chest circumference, for example, although extracted from the scan data, is not exactly the same as taking it on a person with a tape measure. And that has been a dilemma for many years that I believe we're still working on. So during the 20th century, anthropometry has undergone a significant evolution with growing research, and it discredits a lot of racial theories. The field began to focus on understanding human variation both within and across populations and examine these variations within the framework of genetics, environmental factors, and nutrition. Measurement techniques in anthropometry were refined and standardized over this time, facilitating more reliable comparisons between studies, which is, again, critical that we can compare between studies. Uh, the discipline gained recognition for its role in informing design of workspaces, tools, and products. Um, a lot of enhancing comfort, safety, and efficiency of these products for the human population. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during the military anthropometry. It's also been acknowledged for its contribution to identification of human remains in criminal investigations, historical research, and military recovery. So we'll drop back just a little bit and focus back on military anthropometry. And this really kicked off in the 1860s uh, with the creation by President Lincoln of the Sanitary Commission. Um, and they were tasked with collecting data on troops, and these data were used to inform equipment and uniform design, as well as inventory tariffing. And maybe just a quick note on the tariffing is it's not what we see today in current news. Basically, tariffing, for anybody that's interested, is how do we count what's the number of sizes and pieces of equipment in our resource that we can issue out. And we do a lot of that here for trying to calculate how many of each size do we provide to our soldier population. So just to make sure that that's clear. Baxter in 1875 measured, again, physical characteristics of Civil War recruits, substitutes, and enrolled men. And as we see these start moving forward, we start seeing a lot more studies popping up. And on the right-hand side, you can see sort of a military survey timeline where we started seeing after World War II a big increase in the measurement of different warfighters in Marines, Navy, Air Force, and Navy. I'm going to speak a little bit more specifically to the 1988 U.S. Army men and women and the 2010, well, not so much 2010-2012 U.S. Army anthropometric database, which they were conducted at the same time through the work of DevCom Soldier Center, and we focus mostly on the Army here, but we also have the Marine Corps database as well. So again, once these start kicking up, we start seeing a lot more standardized methodologies to measure the same sort of information between these surveys. And one of the reasons why we're interested through these surveys, and this is work that was courtesy of Dr. Choi Rokas, who plotted stature of several of these studies over time. And we see, although stature hasn't changed a lot over time, and the Air Force is a little different, mostly because it's pilots. If that's Dr. Choi, the women may be a little different. But we don't see a lot of change over time with stature. So we don't see stature changes a lot. But we see a lot of circumferential changes in the Army, which we'll see a little bit later in another graph. So people are getting larger in circumferences, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's pulling from the population, where we're seeing an increase in overweight and obesity. We see that trend in the Army, and that impacts the overall fit of clothing and individual equipment, and the fit and comfort and safety. All right, so a little bit on the what we do here at the Applied Ergonomics branch. So a little more focused on answer 88, what we call the anthropometric survey the first time. Collected individual data on over 12,000 soldiers, 132 manual body measurements, 60 derived body measurements, and 26 3D coordinate measures of the head and face, as well as 8,000 hand photos. And this was broken down by age, sex, and population origins. So the current working database for that is 1,774 males and 2,208 females. And this data for many years drove drove the design of equipment for the military as well as commercial entities up into the 2000s, and it's still used quite a bit, um, um, even though we have some additional data in answer two. So that drove a lot of the design of what we are looking at inside and outside the military, and it's critical. One of the largest, if not the largest, anthropometric surveys in the world. Uh, Early in the 2000s, at the beginning of the Iraq War, we started to look at some of the population clothing data wasn't working right. We're looking at getting short on tariffs in extra large um, clothing equipment. So a pilot study was undertaken in about around 2006 um, that captured that information. And again, we looked to see that stature hasn't changed, but we saw a clear example of circumferences changing, and so we're the the population get more varied, and so that led to the development of Answer Two um, survey, which was undertaken in 2012. Um, Again, the study sample was about 12,000 soldiers, which included 1,000 aviators. There was fewer body measurements, manual body measurements, which led to fewer derived body measurements. But this one had a whole host of 3D whole body, head, and foot scans. Um, and again, it was broken up demographically the same as Answer 2, looking at age, sex, and population origins. And the working database for that is almost 5,000 males and almost 2,000 females. And these working databases can be um, reconfigured. So, and that's why we oversampled and we have more individuals in the data pool. When they match the Army's demographic data currently, if we look back, so in 2012 they matched the Army demographic data, and that's what the working database reflects. If we want to go back and change that, see if the Army demographics have changed with respect to age, sex, and population, then we go back to the data pool and relook at that and match a working database that reflects the current Army population. So um, in the meantime, in 2018, we undertook a surveillance study that looked at fewer measurements and fewer numbers of soldiers, but was used to verify and validate that in 2018 we haven't seen any real differences in the demographic changes in the military for the database. We're just about to kick off in 2025 another surveillance study that will go out and collect similar measurements on a large number of individuals to again try to validate that 2012 database hasn't changed significantly. If it has, then we have to look at starting to plan for Answer 3. Uh, and if you look in the way back in the striped shirt, I'm there helping out with the survey. So why are we interested? Well, we're interested in anthropometry for the military for a variety of reasons. Anything that the soldier wears, carries, flies in, rides in, drives in, works in, or sleeps in is impacted by soldier anthropometry. And we just have a couple of images here. You can see that we have a very sexual dimorphic difference in between males and females, and that impacts the clothing that we design and they wear. If you look at the bottom of the page at the graph, you can see between 1988 and 2012, we don't see a lot of variation in stature measurements, but we see a wider variability in circumference measurements with the dark ellipse going out further to the right. So with the anthropometric surveys, we get a lot of good data on the semi-nude individual. However, soldiers don't go to war naked, and you really can't design some of the good workspaces, vehicle platforms around an unclad soldier. So we've done some work with encumbered anthropometry, where we look at taking measurements on individuals in several different um, configurations of clothing and see how it characterizes space change over time. Um, and again, some of these, actually, probably most of these are courtesy of Dr. Choi for putting these together. But looking at the semi-nude, what we refer to as semi-nude, which we'd see in the Answer 2 data, and then adding things like the driver configuration, um, squad gunner, rifleman, and combat medic, and you can see the change in size over time or over configuration. And if you look at the graph on the right, between you can see a big weight jump with between the baseline and the which is semi-nude, and then what we call the slick soldier with no body armor or anything, and then it jumps up to we have a lot of uh, a big jump in weight and space changes over time, and this impacts our ability to put soldiers in vehicle platforms. I just want to talk a little bit about fit testing as well. So what we do here at DevCom, we've got a lot of different things that we um, anything basic that the soldier wears or carries, we have an influence on trying to characterize the fit of that equipment. Um, as you can see, anything from robots to cold weather gear to body armor, helmets, and boots. We try to identify what the optimal size the soldier is wearing and provide that information back to um, vendors, engineers to help them design a better piece of equipment for the soldier. Let's see. And one of the big things we look at for fit testing is um, looking for issues of equipment fit. What we see here is several iterations of equipment that doesn't fit properly, um, gloves, um, coveralls. Uh, what's really interesting with the coveralls is that the extra small is still way too long, and as you can see in the purple with the cuff, but it was too tight for the test participant to move in. So the best optimal size for that uh, piece of equipment was the small, um, but you can see how much extra material was in that small on the legs folded up in the arms. So we provide that back to the engineers to help them try to um, um, overcome those issues and either make more sizes or figure out how to best address those fit issues. If we have equipment that fits like that, or equipment that fits like in the bottom picture of our female participant trying to sight her weapon and cannot sight her weapon because of the body armor and it's pushing her helmet down over her eyes, and she then shoots out into the grass. It becomes very difficult and a big safety issue for our soldiers. Um, and then a little bit on 3D, 4D anthropometry. This is a lot more Dr. Choi's and Dr. Peng Li's realm, um, where we look at different soldier protective equipment interfaces, looking at air gap analysis, looking at distance, fields from helmet clearances and face shields, area coverage. What happened there? Area coverage, plate shape design, which we're currently uh, underway in a study looking at different plate shapes and trying to understand a sort of optimal design. Looking again at visual fit evaluation, how equipment fits on individuals in a virtual way. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, looking at sort of some new developments in 4D anthropometry using our four-dimensional motion 3D MD scanner to capture motion of the mouth and how to sort of apply that kind of technology into some of our soldier equipment design. So overall, at the Applied Ergonomics branch, we serve as the Army's premier laboratory for maintaining anthropometric databases and analyzing soldier size and shape. Um, we collect a lot of manual anthropometric data and conduct a lot of 3D and 4D digital body scanning of soldiers. We specialize in both standard and innovative measurement techniques, including equip measurements. So a lot of the equip measurements and some of the 3D scanning technology, we try to develop new measurements that we can then try and standardize and carry through and sort of influence um, future work. We excel in digital human modeling and advanced 3D and 4D capture. Uh, we conduct a lot of specialized empirical analysis of body size and shape data to enhance soldier clothing and individual equipment, workstation design, and overall performance. Again, we support product development through technical evaluations of CIE fit and sizing. So again, a lot of um, project managers come to us with either one-off prototypes or a small set of different sizes that they ask us to test and evaluate on um, a soldier population. We're lucky here at DevCom Soldier Center that we have a specialized population that volunteers to come to Natick to work with us and volunteer. And these are soldiers, young soldiers out of basic training in AIT that spend about 3 months, 4 months here volunteering for different studies across DevCom Soldier Center. Um, and they're critical to the work that we do. We also go out to different bases and take this equipment out and fit size people in the field and try to get that information back to the engineers. We also look at expertise in CIE grading, sizing of this information, helping to determine procurement quantities, sort of the tariffs. We also provide training to Joint and Allied Services. We've dealt with some anthropometric coursework that we've gone out and trained. We spent a year and a half with the Navy at NavAir with Lori Basham, um, helping with her Navy anthropometric survey of aviators or aircrew. So we trained a bunch of their crew out there, and then we help support that as well for their new survey that should be coming out soon. And again, we preserve and safeguard a lot of the historical military documentation that we have here as well. And then I went down a rabbit hole with co-pilot saying, hey, can Dr. Garley be measuring soldiers in different time periods? And so we have some different time periods of what it interprets me as measuring soldiers, includes robots, as well as Dr. Garley measuring a skull. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much. And if there's any questions, I don't quite know how that works. So over.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Garley. That was a very interesting webinar briefing. I really appreciate that. We really appreciate that. Let me quick check the Q&A. So if someone who joined in the webinar a little later, then you might miss the announcement. So at the very beginning, we basically announced that if you have any technical issue, please type in using the chat option. And if you have any specific questions about the content, then use the Q&A function to type in your question. I don't see any question yet. So in the meantime, actually, I have one quick question about the anthropometry history. So, Dr. Crowley, at the very beginning few slides, you reviewed historical the anthropometry, especially 17th and 18th century slide.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like during that time, quite many systems developed, like classification system or the head separate index system, something like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder whether any of those systems are um, used in the current um, time, because
Oh,
like the right after this slide you mentioned about the BMI, it was very early, like 19th century or something, and we
mhm.
still certainly use that. So I wonder any of the ancient systems that we still use or anything is applied like using the based on that system and we developed.
Yeah, so there's a lot of the historical tools that are still used today in both. I mean, the anthropometer that we use in our current manual measurements was designed by Martin earlier during the 17th century with the cranial index
Hmm.
and facial index. We still use those, especially in osteological studies, or studies of skeletons, where you'd measure the skulls for different variables. Um, those tools are still widely used.
Let's see. So now I see some of the questions in the chat box. So let's go back and review from the beginning. So there is one question from Amanda. In the UK, we've been looking at enhancing diversity for anthropometry data. Yes, diversity is really critical. Is this a consideration for you?
Yes, we always look at diversity. It's very important. Um, it doesn't help us to have a population of all 17-year-old, 18-year-old white males to design equipment. We really need a wide, diverse population to accommodate all the individuals that are involved with our warfighters population.
That's good. So next question from Peter. On behalf of UK MOD, we have completed a tri-service anthro survey using 3D scans and some manual measures. Will it be a good idea for there to be a NATO anthro scan and Boney Point standard?
I would think that would be important. Yes,
Okay.
and I
Oh,
believe under the TTCP, I believe, or the ISO has 3D scan um, standards, right?
yep. The next question, Brian. Okay, so Dr. Brian Connor's question is, will 3D replace manual anthro? How would you answer
I
that?
hope not. At least till after I'm retired. Um, I still think we have a very important aspect to play with manual anthropometry. Um, the scan data, I believe it's important, but again, there's still such a discrepancy between what's extracted and
Mhm,
digitally and what's manually measured. Um, if we go 100% and decide that okay, well that's the way to go, I guess that's the way to go. Um, but some of the scan technology does not necessarily work that well out in the field. I know some of the iPhones take scan data, but the extraction of that data is questionable, I think. Um, and you need a lot of power sources for some of this out in the field, and sometimes Wi-Fi or network, which doesn't usually work in some of the places that we go to measure soldiers.
mhm.
But I think
Okay,
there's a place
so
for both, and it's important for both.
yeah. Um, there are some questions came in the Q&A, so let me just go to Q&A and address some of the questions and then go back to the chat, and then we'll try to cover as many as we could during the this hour until noontime, and then after that I believe we can what is the best option, Sandra, in your previous experience? Because I think there might be a little more question than we can cover during the time, because we have about 17 minutes, so we are going to do as much as possible. But if it's not, then is it like some additional channel after that?
I'm not sure, but sometimes it's possible to include, yeah, a document with a Q&A later on. Let's check.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's just address one of the Q&A, the option question. It's from Vivian. Can the 3D, 4D digital anthropometry measurements collected be at each location? Is the anthropometer portable?
The anthropometer is portable, yes. The 3D 4D scanner uh, is portable, um, but not easily portable. It takes a lot of calibration to set it up and to move it. Um, so I would say it's better research lab scanner than it is a field scanner
Yeah, so
at this
I
time.
think it's right. I agree with you. And then also it depending on the system. So some system very portable is developed as portable, and then some system, even though it says portable, but not exactly practical. So, but both of them has like the pro and cons. So if it's more portable, then highly likely there's a possibility of lower resolution. And then if it's not portable, then it's very sensitive. And then it could be high resolution, or there are some new system that's light, portable, and high resolution. So depending on the system that we can say yes or no. But in general, the anthropometer for the manual measurements is very portable. The other systems, depending on the system, I would say.
The data is also very portable for the manual measurements. Uh, the the scan data it takes a lot of space to store scan data, a lot of computer power.
The next question is about the difference, strength, and weakness of using manual measurement versus 3D scans. So there are, even before we asked Dr. Garley about this, I think it would be better to discuss about this issue after the next webinar, because our next webinar is going to be
Mm.
given by Dr. Susan Ashdown, and then she's going to focus more on the 3D anthropometry, and then how we are going to add 3D anthropometry to the regular the profile that we are going to collect. So I think it would be more interesting debate and then a discussion once we have the second webinar, and then deal together those. Okay, the next question. I work with the firefighter population, and the anthropometry use is largely still based on those gathered by the military. There is the assumption that women are just a shorter version of men, and I see that in all your picture. Is the data driven?
Is the data is the data? No. So well, if those are the pictures, yeah, those are probably AI driven. So you're right, though. Females are not small men and shouldn't be considered small male, um, and that we need to accommodate the female population. Yes, we do have small males that could be smaller than some of the females in the population, but we shouldn't consider them. Men and women are shaped differently, have different muscular structures, and that should be considered in the accommodation of our clothing equipment for sure. AI didn't take that into account, though, did it?
All right. The next question is, how did they design the adjustment for women? Was it based on a measurement of the female population exclusively, or was it achieved by adapting the patterns of men?
So right now, a lot of the clothing equipment over the years has been adjusting the patterns of male clothing or measurements taken off males. More recently, we've had the opportunity to include female data to design female clothing equipment. We have a female warfighter's duty uniform. We have clearly dress uniforms are based off of female data, as well as we did have, I don't think it's in the system right now anymore, a female body armor system that was designed specifically off female body measurements. So we do try to incorporate females and help to elicit and forward that information to the designers and try to give them the importance that we really need to accommodate women, that they are not small men. That's a battle that we do a lot with engineers and designers.
Yes. Let me see. What is the next one? Um, okay, let me just go back to the chat box for the rest of the questions to address. Let's see, where were we? Um, okay, so I think this one we hadn't heavy addressed about the question from Dragas Tanasa. What is your system of size recommendation in relation to actual body measurements. How do you recommend the correct size when you have the garment dimensions and the body dimensions? That is actually a really great question, but Sandra, I believe we are going to address that in a later webinar series, right? So the fit test and then the body size, garment size, and then sizing chart and sizing system development and things like that. So please hold on to it and then please come back to our later webinar so that we can discuss further on that. Um, Next, by Peter, all anthropometry is static, but have anyone looked at dynamic encumbered anthropometry?
We are actually starting to look at dynamic anthropometry using the 3D, 4D scanner. Um, we are starting with movement in semi-nude, not necessarily encumbered. Although I think Dr. Pengley is actually working with some individuals on looking at wearing some parachute equipment to capture some information in the 4D scanner as well. And that's a very new area for us that we're starting to explore.
Yes, so currently we are working on the methodology and then like how we are going to extract the data. So when it comes to 4D anthropometry, it is like how we're going to standardize the methodology. And then once we standardize the methodology and then collect the data, then how we are going to extract the dimensions or any information out of the massive amount of data. So that is another big area that we have to explore, which we haven't really had that with the traditional anthropometry, unless you have like um, thousands of people data collection, of course, then you have quite a lot of data points, but still not even comparable to that with the 4D anthropometry. And I think this issue, basically, Dr. Alimony Moot, Sandra, you probably have a little more familiar. It's in your domain, right?
Yes, this is something this we are doing a lot of work now in relation to this issue. I hope I can also participate in a webinar presenting all the work done in this domain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brian, thank you for the comments that the USMC survey is looking at 4D minimally clad and equipped through. I am not quite sure whether they are actually looking at the 4D. I do know that they basically measure the static anthropometry for semi-nude and encumbered and some of the kind of performance related pose. But I didn't really catch that they're actually collecting the 4D. I'll double check with Mark and also Daisy. Next, uh, from Dr. Robin Carfell, you mentioned that we still use many of the techniques and formulas used historically, like the cephalic index or the Birchvian man. Have there been any major upgrades given modern diet, medical practices, etc.? What do you think, Dr. Crowley?
Well, so a BMI is used a lot still, but it's not a very useful
Hmm.
metric. But we've looked at well, we haven't, but things like DEXA, dual linear exorpometry, absorptiometry, DEXA machine, basically bone, um, looking at bone mineral density, um, is the gold standard for looking at some of this. But it's also been compared to what we call the in-body, which is a bioelectric impedance system that gives very close body composition data compared to DEXA. So a lot of this is built off of technology that keeps being built in and improved upon. Um,
Hmm.
and we've just actually purchased a in-body to take on our next surveillance study to collect some of that body composition data.
Okay. I actually skipped one question. Let me just go back and read. It's by Dominica. Would you consider doing a static fit is primarily important to set a baseline on what we can define as a good fit within the military context?
Well, there's always static fit to find sort of what a good size is, but then we also need to do some movement data. Not just we do a little bit uh, for us, have them move around, make sure that the garment fits, but then we work very closely with our on our same team, but human factors engineers to do range of motion measurements and mobility tasks to make sure that the garment fits correctly and interacts or integrates well with other uh, clothing equipment. So body armor and helmets, body armor and duty uniform, chemical biological garments, and make sure that there's no um, gaps and seams and stuff when they bend over. So there's a lot of interaction between us doing static measurements and then working closely with our colleagues doing human factors task analysis.
Okay. I think that's about all the questions that we addressed. Oh, there's one more. Okay. Discussion of body composition has a long and somewhat contumacious history in DoD. Maybe a webinar topic. Not at this round, not for this round, but we'll definitely uh, keep in mind and then
You've got three
include the
years.
body composition. Not during the current 3-year webinar series. I do not recall that we included body composition. Sandra, have we include that?
I think we have in mind at the beginning, but we haven't got any expert related to this at this moment, so we
Right.
can.
So we focused on the surface anthropometry, not the inside. So, but
Yes,
Brian, we'll keep in mind that we'll basically come back to that topic and then think more for the next time.
yes, sure.
Uh, all right. So I think luckily we addressed all the questions. Have I missed anything? Oh, okay. So there's one question just came in. Um, Let me read it. Are the measurements you are taking able to fit with the large body composition study Usarium was tested with undertaking several years ago to learn more about anthropometry from what they collected or vice versa? Explorate your data set coming up to more composition measurements, or is the in-body information all there is?
Well, some of the body measurements were taken, and I'd have to go back and look for sure, can be applied to some of the military body equations. Um, the current I haven't looked at it in a little while, but I think the current Army regulation for body fat um, measurement is just waist circumference now. I believe. I think they've dropped some of the other measurements, height, weight, and waist circumference. I think. Um, so we can apply some of that as well as the scan data that we take. We can probably apply some of the extracted data to those equations as well, which I did with Dr. Brian Corner back in I don't know what year that was, 2005 or six. That we
Mm.
extracted some of the scan data, compared that to manual measurements and to DEXA extracted body fat equation measurements. Over.
All right, then I think we addressed all the questions, right? And there are no more questions in either chat box or Q&A box. All right, then I think that went pretty well because this was our very first kickoff webinar um, as the new series, and then we really appreciate every attendee for today. And Sandra, any other comments from your end?
Yeah, nothing to add, only to thank you all the people attending. I have seen more than 50 people, so Uh, thank you, Todd, because you have met a lot of people here. So I think it has been a success. So thank you, Todd, for being the first one in this webinar
No,
series.
thank you, Dr.
And
Choi, for me being the first one.
All
But thank
right.
you for having me.
Thank you so much for everyone attended today's session and then speaker and then my co-chair. We are very happy to close today's webinar and I'm happy to give you back 1 minute of, oh no, it's exactly 12. Thank you so much.
yeah, I would like also to remind that next Monday,
Yes.
12th,
Yes.
we have the second webinar that
Mm-hmm.
will be presented by Dr. Susan Aston. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and will be around, she will be addressing the 3D scanning technology. So yeah, keep in mind, and you are invited to join.
Just one more thing is that next Monday, because our whole we're all friends basically go on a business trip because we are basically starting big survey from next Monday. So I won't be able to attend our own seminar, which is kind of unfortunate. I try to attend at least just the regular attendees so that I can pick and see it. But today's session all recorded and then you will be able to see it through the YouTube channel. So and then also the Mondays webinar as well. So if you miss any portion, you want to go back, then please feel free to look it up through YouTube and then review. And then if you have any questions, please email us so that we can address and then more knowledge sharing and then collaboration. We good?
Blake asked, I don't know if you saw that, whether you're going to announce as new webinar series come up, if you'll send them out.
I believe the new webinar, the register link is already available, which is Monday. And then in the future ones, if you want to see the whole list, then you can go through the IEA website. There is Anthropometry Technical Committee page. Then we listed all the topics in the future webinar so that you can see what you're gonna see in the future. And then the after the Monday, the next ones we haven't really scheduled yet. But once it was scheduled, you will see it through the LinkedIn page. All right, then thank you so much, and then have a nice rest of the day.